It's now 30 p.m. Central African Time. This is the Globe on SABC News. Thank you for watching. I'm Simpiyo Ngwane. Good evening.
Indeed, thank you for joining us and a very good evening to you. I'm Lulu Gabu. On to our top story. Zimbabwe activist Pastor Evan Mawarire has been freed from prison a day after the High Court ordered his release on bail. Mawarire was detained at a maximum security prison in Harare on subversion charges amid violent anti-government protest and faces up to 20 years in jail if convicted.
Prosecutors argued against the bail application, saying Mawarire posed a flight risk and could be reoffended if released. Mawarire came to prominence as a critic of former leader Robert Mugabe and led a national shutdown against him in 2016.
He is accused of stoking the recent unrest, which was met with a violent crackdown reminiscent of the actions of security forces under Mugabe. Protests erupted in mid-January following a hike in fuel prices and lasted for several days. Security forces dispersed demonstrations by force and cracked down on activists. Pastor Evan Mawarire has agreed to speak to us to share his experiences in jail and to explain the nature of the criminal charges he now has to fight in court. Pastor Mawarire, thank you so much for joining us and a very good evening to you.
Thank you so much for having me and good evening to you too.
Now, how do you feel at this point in time after being freed?
It actually is quite a sad feeling. I know that one is supposed to be happy after being released from a long incarceration. It was 14 days in the maximum security prison. But it's sad because I was not supposed to have been arrested at all. I'm a citizen who was acting within the confines of the Constitution of Zimbabwe. I did not break the law. I did not encourage people to be violent. If anything, I encouraged people to protest peacefully. We asked people to stay at home and asked people not to be violent. And yet I'm accused of by the government of the exact opposite. And so it's really, really sad that we put our citizens through these kinds of experiences.
Now, you're charged with subverting the government, a crime which carries up to 20 years. This is very serious. Are you worried you might face some time in jail?
Absolutely. I mean, I am worried. I want to also be very aware as I speak to you that because the case is now before the courts, and so I must be careful not to make statements that would undermine the work of the courts. However, I have been tried of the same charge in 2017 and was acquitted at the end of 2017, spent the whole year facing this charge. My hope is that our courts will acquit themselves as just courts of law, because if I am convicted on the charges, the evidence that is being used is the video that I made. I at a just and fair judgment.
Now, are you confident you will receive a fair trial?
Well, again, I don't want to make a judgment on the courts that are presiding over my case. At this point, I had been denied bail in the magistrate's court, but the High Court did grant me bail after submissions were made. The bail conditions are quite stringent, as well. It is my hope that in due course that those bail conditions could be reviewed, as I am not a convicted person. I've never been convicted of a crime, of this nature, before. And I think the biggest concern here is more to do with our constitution, which needs citizens to enact it into life. And if we are penalized by our government for doing what our constitution says, then I think we have a big problem in terms of building a democratic Zimbabwe.
You touched on very stringent bail conditions. Are you able to speak to us about those bail conditions for your release?
Yes, absolutely. The bail conditions are public knowledge. The courts set a bail amount of $2,000. They also set a condition for me to submit my passport, which we have already done. We also submitted title deeds to our family home that is in my parents' name. And I'm also to report to the police three times a week.
Now, speak to us about Chikurubi prison, where you were kept for 14 days. What are the conditions like, and what was the experience like?
Chikurubi Maximum Security Prison is obviously not designed to be a comfortable place. The arrests that were made over the last 2 to 3 weeks were very random, and there were also mass arrests that were made. And so the conditions in Chikurubi meant that we were crowded, overcrowded, and crammed into the cells. There are hundreds of men that are there that are charged with crimes that they did not commit. In fact, the apprehensions themselves were such that people were pulled from their homes as they slept with their families, with their wives, and taken outside, beaten and abused, and then taken to a police station where they were handed over to the police. And then those that arrested them then come back to their homes and rape their wives. So we were in a prison where men are distressed, speaking to their families, but also nursing wounds, broken arms, broken legs. There was a man there with a hanging ear. His ear had been shot off. We also had children in the cell. When I left last night, by the time I had left 24 hours ago, we had 16-year-old boys in Chikurubi for the last 3 weeks, and that is unacceptable.
Now, you are quoted as saying just above 1,000 more other people remain behind bars. Is this an accurate figure, and how are they doing?
Well, I cannot be accurate about the figure. I've not done a count. In Chikurubi, where I was, my estimate, when I look at the number of people that were in the cells that we were in, my estimate would be that in Chikurubi we were about 300. I know that there are people that have been arrested across the country. In Bulawayo, the second largest city, there were more arrests that took place there, and in many other places. So the figure could well be approaching the 1,000 mark in terms of people that were arrested. My main concern, as would be the concern of a lot of people, is that it seems that not a lot of people have been able to get bail. Bail seemed to be very hard to come by. You would know that the lawyers in Zimbabwe marched and protested the conduct of the magistrates' court, who seemed not to be giving bail. But I know that, of course, I got bail yesterday, and I know some more people have been receiving bail as well. And there have also been a few acquittals that have been there. But it is very concerning that many of the people that are stuck in prison right now are innocent, and people that were arrested by people that are not known, whether they were police, whether they are soldiers, whether they are rogue elements of the police or the soldiers. There have been comments made by the police that these are rogue elements. And if they are rogue elements, why would police stations accept these people and charge them if they were handed over by rogue elements?
Now, Pastor Mawarire, what do you think Zimbabwe as a country should do to resolve both its economic and political impasse?
We are at a place where undoubtedly there needs to be dialogue, and open and inclusive dialogue of all key stakeholders in Zimbabwe. This means the political players. We're talking about the governing party. We're talking about the opposition parties. We're talking here about civic society. We're talking about social movements and citizens. We must urgently sit down and accept what our problems are, what the root cause is, and then accept that we all have a part to play. And once we have solutions, then together we go out and engage the world to help us. Our president has been trying to engage the international community to invest in Zimbabwe. But I think clearly this is a tough assignment for him on his own, because ZANU-PF does not have the credibility to be able to call for financial or economic help for Zimbabwe because of their track record of the last 38 odd years.
Do you think it's time that the governing party starts speaking to the opposition to try and find solutions for the country?
Oh, yes, I think that time is long overdue. Our politicians must realize, and must realize quickly, that this is not about their egos. It's about the lives of people. It's about the lives of Zimbabweans. Right now, they have been destroying the informal businesses that people had set up. You would know that our rate of unemployment in Zimbabwe is estimated at being between 80 and 90%. That is 9 in every 10 Zimbabweans are not formally employed. And so when the government then goes out in the middle of an economic crisis and they destroy the very informal businesses that citizens have set up to survive, it says a lot about what they are prioritizing. So the time for dialogue is long overdue. And as Zimbabweans, we are now calling on the main political parties to sit down and to talk and to thrash things out and help us find a solution.
Pastor Mawarire, thank you so much for joining us. We'll leave it there for now. That was Pastor Evan Mawarire, a Zimbabwean rights activist, and he was speaking to us from Zimbabwe. Time now for a quick break.